Hello, everyone, and welcome to another video with our famous lawyer by now, Naveen, who did multiple videos with us so far about the J1 visa, the H1 visa, how to get a green card through research. And today we designed this session to answer your questions that you asked me on the Instagram Q&A. So we'll go over these questions, and which can cover most of the topics that generally international graduates ask when it comes to visa. So we'll start with the non-immigrant type of visa questions, and then we'll go to the green card citizenship related questions. So the first question that we have from our followers is, if someone is interested in doing a rotation in the US or research, what type of visa should they apply for?
Hi, Malki. It's great to see you again, and thank you for having me come back, to address some of the questions that have been coming up. To start with, people who are coming for rotations, they typically are able to apply and enter the United States on the B1 tourist visa, and that is the most appropriate. And then for the research, it would then be the J1 for research. The challenge right now with getting a B1 visa appointment is it's still very difficult to secure these appointments. A lot of the consulates are still functioning with half the regular staff, so they don't have appointments readily available, and it can be over a year wait to actually secure a visa appointment. So if you're trying to get the visa to come here for an elective, you do need to plan well in advance because it's really difficult to obtain an appointment right now.
And that brings me to another question an applicant asked is, if I'm planning to apply for a rotation or research, how far ahead should I apply for the visa?
So it depends on where you live and which consulate you're going to. A lot of the consulates right now are reporting the wait times of over a year. So you do need to plan very much in advance.
Wow, 1 year.
Yeah.
Is there like
Yeah.
a website that I can see in my country how long is the wait for
Yes.
each type of visa?
Yes. It's actually if you just Google visa wait times, travel.state.gov, which is the State Department website, has a website where you can put in the consulate's name and then it will tell you what the reported wait time is. But you don't actually know until you've gone through the steps of filling out that form, which is a DS-160 form, paying the application fee, and then you'll see what the calendar availability is for an appointment. And it may sometimes say there's nothing available, or you'll see that the calendar has nothing available until sometime late 2023 or even into 2024.
Wow, that's a long wait time. So applicants should
Yeah.
definitely plan things way ahead. And that's also a challenge. Some people think that they're going to get it within a month and they apply for a rotation after 6 months, and they don't expect that they have to wait that much to get the visa. So just keep that in mind. The next question is, when I'm applying to the visa, what are the factors that the officer considers to grant me the visa, or what are the things that I should keep in mind to increase my chance of getting the visa approved?
That's a great question. So the most common visa then would be the tourist visa or the J1 visa. And both of these require the applicant to have really strong ties to their home country. So there's this provision called 214B where the consular officer will assume or presume that you have the intention to live in the United States or work in the United States, and you really need to convince them that you have strong ties to go back to your home country. You're still in school, or you have job prospects, your family's there. So you do need to bring documents to the interview to show that you have these strong ties and it's your intention to come back to your home country. So that's important for those visa categories. If you're applying for a work visa, such as the H-1B, it's less important. But for those visa categories based on work, they want to make sure that you are the person being described on that petition, you are qualified, so they can ask you about your qualifications, and also do you have an understanding of where you're going to be working, what kind of work you're going to be doing.
Awesome. Another question related to the J1, H1 visa. These are the two most common types when it comes to residency applicants. Somebody asked, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each type of visa when it comes to applying to residency?
The J1 versus the H1.
Yes.
So the J1 is great for people who are going through longer training programs. So if you're going to be a surgeon and you know your training is going to take several years, then the J1 is better because the H1B visa has a 6-year limit. Whereas the J1, it's 7 years, and then you can get 8th or 9th year extensions if there's a need for that specialty in your home country. If you're doing this on an H1, you're going to run out of time. The H1B has an advantage in that you don't become subject to that 2-year home residence requirement. So if your plan is to do internal medicine or a program that's going to be completed within 3 years or 4 years or even 5 years, then the H1B is the one that you should aim for, so that you don't have to worry about that J1 waiver, which we can talk about in further detail.
Awesome. Somebody asked about the J2, which I assume is the visa for a dependent on the J1.
Yep.
They asked, can the J2 be renewed without the renewal of the J1 visa, which I assume the J1 holder in that case lost that status. What happens with the J2 holder, and can they renew it independently?
So there are two different concepts. There's the status, which is determined by your form DS 2019 that's issued by ECFMG. And every year that your contract is renewed to complete the program, you will receive a new DS 2019 as the J1, and the spouse will receive the form DS 2019 as the J2. So that document will be extended, but it's dependent on the principal J1's DS 2019 being renewed. If the question is related to the actual visa sticker, then it's okay for the J2 to travel and get their visa sticker, the stamp, renewed, even though the J1 person remains back in the United States and does not renew their visa, but they do have that DS 2019 form to show that they're maintaining J1 status.
So if the J1 holder loses their J1 status, the J2 cannot renew the J2 based on, because the J1 is the reason why they're getting the J2.
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So that if you're coming here as a dependent spouse or child, your status is dependent on the principal person maintaining and working. And if they lose their position, then the dependent status is also becomes invalid.
I see. And somebody asked, can I apply from for the J1 visa from inside the US, which I assume they already have another type of visa, and they're asking probably for the change of status.
Yes. So if you're in the United States maintaining status, then you can apply for a change of status. So for example, if you're here on an H4, right? So you're on a spouse visa, your spouse is working on an H1B, and then you match into a program and you can get a J1, then you would receive that DS 2019 from ECFMG, and then you would apply to change your status from within the United States with USCIS. And just a word of caution, though, that those can take a really long time. And so it's possible that your status application may not be granted in time for your program start date. So there are different strategies to try and get this done more quickly, and immigration is supposed to be rolling out premium processing for those types of applications, but that was always the challenge with doing a change of status within the United States, is your application may not be granted by the program start date. The second issue is that you need to be maintaining your status up until your program start date. So as an example, if you come to the United States on a tourist visa, you're not supposed to have the intention of remaining here and working or doing a J1 training, right? So, and then you're only admitted into the United States for a short period of time. It may be 6 months. And the period of time that you're admitted will probably end before your program start date. So there would be a gap. So if you came to the United States in January, as an example, and you're only admitted until April or May, but your program doesn't start until July, you're not able to request a change of status because there's a gap from when your current status ends and when your future J1 status would begin. And then you also need to be aware that if you do come into the United States on a tourist visa and apply for a change of status, then they can question what your intentions were when you actually came to the United States.
I see. And somebody actually asked a very similar question. If someone is on J1, can they transition to H1B without leaving the country, which is similar, a change of status? But I think the applicant said that their visa is expired because they're waiting to extend it and the extension did not come back yet. So I assume there is a gap now in their visa. So what happens in that case?
So they're going from J1 to H1. So if you're extending H4 status, just to go back to my earlier example, and your status is pending because the applications just take so long, that's fine. If you have a valid application that's in process, then you are considered to be maintaining status, and you might be eligible to then jump off of a pending H4 extension to the J1. But immigration first needs to grant that first application before they can do the second one. To go from J1 to H1 in the United States, if you are subject to that 2-year home residence requirement, you cannot apply for that change of status unless you secure a waiver of your J1. And that waiver has to be through an interested government agency, such as a Conrad waiver. If you apply for any other kind of waiver, such as a hardship waiver, then you actually, you can get an H1, but you would have to exit and re-enter the United States with an actual visa in hand.
So if you're getting the waiver through the hardship, you can't change the whole thing from within the US?
Not to another work visa, such as an O1 or an H1. You do need to go to the consulate and get the visa. But if you're applying for a green card and you got the hardship waiver, then you could apply for adjustment of status for the green card. There's a lot of these little subtleties, for each situation. So every case can get so complicated that I would say that for all of these, it's really important, again, to just consult with the attorney and they can advise on the right strategy, because there are so many variations and factors to consider.
Yeah, definitely. For these specific, the last two questions we talked about, definitely talk to a lawyer. These are very complicated scenarios. And, sometimes a very small mistake that you think your application is pending and you think you're in the safe zone, but you made this gap, or there was something that went wrong that may complicate your whole situation in the US. So I would definitely recommend talking to a lawyer for these complicated issues. But just to follow up on that, one of the things that we talked about before we jump to the next question. So if somebody has an application to change status from one type to another, and their first type of visa expired, while they're waiting this change of status, does that keep them in status, or they need to apply for an extension of the first one in addition to the change of status?
It depends on what status they're applying for. So if you are working on an H-1B and you apply for an extension of that H-1B status, then you can actually continue working while your extension is pending for up to 240 days, assuming the petition is asking for at least those 8 months. But if you apply for an extension of a tourist visa and you can only ask for 6 months, right, of extension, but the application takes more than 6 months to be approved, you should not remain here simply because your application is pending.
I see. So if in that case, you have to leave.
You have to leave within the time you asked for, right? And you can't just rely on them, because when they do approve the case, they're going to only approve it until the time you asked for. They're not going to approve it up until the date of the approval, but it would be backdated to the original amount of time. And so then you would be in a situation where your status was extended, but only up until a certain period. And now the last 3 months are not approved. And so you've been overstaying.
And you've been in the US for some time period without any visa coverage.
Exactly, yeah.
So the next question is, probably we're going to need a full video about it, but we can touch about it briefly, which is, is it easy to get a waiver for J1?
Yeah. Yes. So there are different categories. There's through an interested government agency, which is through your work. For those, I would say the most common are through the Conrad waiver program, where every state has 30 waiver slots that they give out. But it's 100% easier to get these waivers if you are doing primary care. If you're a specialist, then you may be limited to 5 out of 30 slots, or the State Department of Health, which is the agency that runs the program. They make up their own rules on what's important for their state, and they can say that they really need primary care, and so they will tell all the specialists to wait until, you know, later in the program to see if there are any slots left, and only then can you apply. So if you're trying to, you know, target a more desirable state, for example, like California, it's very difficult to get a waiver there as a specialist through the Conrad program. And then there are other options, you know, for the Veterans Administration, the VA. They have their own waiver program that they run. Health and Human Services, HHS, has a waiver program that they run, but HHS also, you know, is only for primary care. So it's certainly easier to get the waiver if you're not a specialist. But there are other states where it's more friendly towards specialists. You just have to be open to living at, you know, some states that may not be as popular.
I see. Thank you for that. So now we're going to move on to the questions that are more related to the green card citizenship related questions. So I have many IMGs ask me, we have like a family member, an aunt, an uncle, sometimes father, mother, brother, sister. In the US, they have green card or citizenship, and they ask me, can they sponsor me to come to the US?
Yeah, so under the immigration scheme and family-based green card processes, it's limited to a certain relationship. And so if you are a permanent resident, then you can only sponsor a spouse, a child, or son and daughter. So a son and daughter is somebody who's over the age of 21, but the son and daughter must remain unmarried. So if you have, you know, if your parent is a permanent resident, you're over the age of 21, and then you get married, you're no longer qualified to be a beneficiary of that green card process. If your aunt or uncle are permanent residents, they can't sponsor you. For citizens, they can sponsor their parents. Their children will probably be citizens already. But spouses and U.S. citizens can also sponsor their siblings. And I actually get this a lot. You know, my sibling's a U.S. citizen. Why can't I get a green card through them? Within each of these categories under the family scheme, there are limited number of green cards that they give out in a year. And so they're considered to be oversubscribed, which means that they receive a lot more applications than there are number of visas given in a year. And the quotas are pretty small for the siblings of U.S. citizens. So for that category, which we call the F4, as an example, it can take over 15 years to get a visa. Which means that your sibling can file that petition for you, but nothing is going to happen on that for 15 years. So it's not a path through which you can secure the green card to do your residency. It's something that they can file for you now, but you need to go on with your life, you know, and then look to immigrating down the road. And then for the green card holders who are filing their petitions, right now, there seems to be a visa number available for spouses and children of permanent residents. For the sons and daughters who are unmarried, the wait time is around 7 years.
Wow, that's very important information to share with the applicants, but because I'm sure they've seen that, oh yeah, someone can sponsor you, an aunt can sponsor, but the wait time is 15 years, and that's for med students applying to residency. That's a huge gap in their education that they can't afford, you know, waiting 15 years. So just keep in mind strategies that you want to follow if you want to wait 3-4 years just to like apply? Because once also I think once somebody applies for you and they know that you have intentions to immigrate, it might complicate your non-immigrant visas, right?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. We've actually had cases where the aunt or uncle had filed the petition for their parent, right? And now they're applying for a J-1 visa, and they were beneficiaries of that filing, and they would actively have to say, yes, someone had filed for me years ago, but I'm not interested. I'm only focused on my J-1. I actually want to withdraw, and maybe in that case, that green card application that was submitted on their behalf years ago. So there are consequences of filing or having someone file the green card, case for you. So again, it's something to keep in mind in terms of what the strategy will be for a future J-1 visa.
Yeah, so yeah, just keep in mind these wait times and talk to a lawyer because each case is different. Your situation might be different because these wait time can change your whole plans. If it's a year thing, maybe you can study, do some residency in your country before you come here. But anything more than 1-2 years, it's gonna be disastrous to your application if you're just doing nothing in your country and you're waiting and waiting. And even for sometimes first degree relative, it's taking more than a year or two, right?
Yeah, I mean, even for spouses of U.S. citizens, right? That's taking well over 2 years. So you can file now, but you would have to postpone when you're going to be applying for residency, keeping in mind that it may be a 2-year process.
Awesome. So another question that is very related is somebody finished their residency and they want to bring their parents here. And this is a case of so many international graduates. Are they able to do that? And generally, how long does it take?
This is somebody who's on a non-immigrant visa, so
They already got their green card.
Oh, they got their
yeah.
green card. Oh, okay, got it. All right. So a permanent resident cannot file for their parent. They have to wait until they become a citizen, and then they can sponsor their parent for a green card. So that you have to wait 5 years or 3 years if you're married to a U.S. citizen, become a citizen, and then you can sponsor your parent.
And some residents, while they're in residency, they're on J1, they find a partner, they get married, and now they're married to a U.S. citizen. How can they get a green card if they are on J1 with the 2-year home residency requirement and they're already married now to a U.S. citizen?
So they still have that 2-year home residence requirement to deal with before they can apply for the green card. And simply marrying a U.S. citizen does not, that doesn't go away. So they would have to apply for a waiver. Potentially, there might be a hardship argument that they're now married to a U.S. citizen who would suffer some form of hardship if they went back to your home country for 2 years, or if they remained in the United States and only you go back for 2 years. So you would have to explain the hardships in both of those situations, get that hardship waiver approved, and then you can apply for the green card. Or you can do your 3 years of service through a Conrad waiver program, get that waiver granted, and then apply for the green card.
Great. And the final question is very similar to this, but this scenario is an IMG who has not gotten on any visa yet, is married to a green card holder, and they want to start their residency. So they're applying this year a green card holder along with their husband who is doesn't have any type of visa. What type of visa should they start on before they start their residency to avoid J1, or is there anything they can do to avoid the J1 so they can avoid the 2-year home residency requirement?
They really need to focus on getting a residency program that offers H-1B, because the fact that they're married to a permanent resident, it will be really difficult to get a J-1 visa, since having that close relationship with a permanent resident, it will be really difficult to demonstrate that you have the desire to go back to your home country when in fact your spouse is living and working in the United States. So in that situation, you really need to focus on getting an H-1B visa for the residency, and then after you arrive here on the H-1B, you can apply for the green card as the spouse of a permanent resident, and then complete the residency, through your green card process. But initially, you need to come here on an H-1B.
Can the spouse sponsor them before the residency starts to get them on the green card process?
They can, but it can be a 2-year process. So certainly the spouse can file, and then one will come here and start their residency, and the other one will stay back, complete the green card process, and then join them 2 years later. And so not only will there be a separation of the spouses for 2 years, but there would be the 2-year interruption in their training.
Yeah, which in that case, it makes more sense. Even if you get on a J1, it makes more sense to start your residency. And if you had to go back or find a waiver, because sometimes H1 is not easy to find, not all programs sponsor.
Yeah,
so
it's
if you
not,
have to wait 2 years in order to start your residency, I would rather just start residency and then see what happens.
Sure. Yeah. And the other one is where you have those two spouses on J1s, right? They're both doing J1s. And then one of them goes through the process more quickly, finishes their waiver, gets their green card. The other one is still completing their process. They have to go through that same path of completing that waiver requirement before they can complete the green card as well. So yeah,
that is an interesting one, because one would be done and the other has to go through the whole process again.
Yes.
Maybe go to another place to practice in order to
Yeah. It's hard to match in the same program, and then when you have immigration issues on top of that, it can be very difficult because you might be in 2 different states doing your own waivers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Naveen. That was a lot of information, a lot of useful information for anyone who's looking to learn about the visa process. As you see, for our viewers, it's not an easy thing. Don't make mistakes and try to figure things on your own. Google, the websites can give you an idea about things, but I highly recommend, especially for complicated questions like some of the ones that we answered, some of the questions related to the waiver, I highly recommend you talk to a lawyer, and I'll leave Naveen's information in the description below. Thank you so much, Naveen, for your
Thank you so much
being here. For our viewers, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below, or feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter at Mark Assad, my Facebook page Mark Assad MD, or our email info@themagic.com. If you like this video or find any value in it, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell sign so you get notified about future videos related to the visa, USMLE, or the match process. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and see you in future videos.